All right. Thank everybody for coming today. I know we're all busy and we've got a lot of things going on, but I want to welcome you to our webinar. We're here to talk about the new Nonprofit Starter Pack version 3.0. Many of us have been hearing about the Starter Pack for many months. It was codenamed Cumulus as it was being developed, and now they've titled it version 3.0. So let's get started here. We are recording this session, so you don't have to take notes. We will make the recording available, and we'll publish it to everyone. We're using a utility called GoToWebinar. Most people have some familiarity with GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions, please do use the question and answer features of GoToWebinar. We've decided to keep everybody on mute for the duration just to avoid the background noise and everything else that might cause distractions, so appreciate it. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So here's our agenda. Who is KELL? Why did you join this? Well, many of you are previous or current KELL clients, and so you've probably got some familiarity, but many others are not, and so we will be giving you a very brief introduction to who is KELL. We will talk about what's new with the Nonprofit Starter Pack version 3.0, and really why do you care? Because we feel like that's a context that is very important to the real discussion, which is your options to upgrade and the process of upgrading to the Nonprofit Starter Pack. So we'll do a quick demonstration of the new features. We'll talk about how you would upgrade, whether it's going to be easy or hard, and the answer is it depends. We'll talk about any homework that you need to conduct in order to prepare for this upgrade. So let's jump right in. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Tommy Spann. Everybody calls me Tommy. My real name is Tompkins. I oversee the business operations here at KELL. So that's the sales and the marketing aspects. I've been working with nonprofits since I started my own organization back in 2000. And I've been working with Salesforce and nonprofits as my core focus since 2007. So I've been involved in this industry for quite a while and really have a true passion for helping nonprofits use Salesforce. And I've said many times, I think that after email and Excel, Salesforce is the most transformative technology that nonprofits have had available to them. I'm joined today by a true legend in our industry, celebrity, Judi Sohn. Judi is a senior solution architect here with us at KELL. She's an MVP recognized by the Salesforce.com company. She is, I think, like a 5-time speaker at Dreamforce. She's got 3 sessions this year that she's going to be speaking in. She's just a tremendous wealth of knowledge. And when it comes specific to the Nonprofit Starter Pack, she's been heavily involved working with the foundation for many months to test the application, to help compile some of the documentation that's appropriate to share with everybody. So she's truly a behind-the-scenes as well as in front of the world expert on all things Nonprofit Starter Pack and Salesforce for nonprofits. So who is KELL? Well, we like to keep it very simple because we have truly chosen to just focus on helping nonprofits implement and optimize their use of Salesforce. This is all we do. We only work with nonprofits. We only work with Salesforce. We've done this now more than 700 times since we started in 2009. Our team has grown to where we have more than 30 staff, about half of which are in Austin, Texas. The rest of us are spread all around the place. So Judi is in her home of New Jersey. I'm in my home of Portland, Oregon, and we have folks in various other locations. But our passion and our focus remains true. Most of us, if not all of our project managers, are from the nonprofit industry, so we have a deep experience and a deep passion for helping you take advantage of this technology. We've worked with, as I mentioned, more than 700 organizations. Here are just a few of the groups that we've worked with in the past couple of years that we're very proud to call our partners. And now let's talk about what's new with the NPSP 3.0. I mentioned we were going to keep it really brief, in terms of marketing KELL, so we want to dig into the content. So with that, I'm going to ask Judi to join me on the call here. Judi, if you can chime in. And I want to just give a brief, say hi, Judi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, hear you great. So there's several new features to the Nonprofit Starter Pack, but Judy, I think you'll agree with me that really the bulk of the functionality is more behind the scenes, right? It's
Absolutely.
the settings. It's fixing a lot of the bugs and a lot of the little quirks that weren't working really well. There is the new address management functionality, but the real meat of this huge upgrade is in the data model. It's in the structure of how they are organizing households to align more with the core model of Salesforce. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Judy, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to give controls over to you and love to just kind of get a demonstration of some of these new features.
Sure, and one moment while we make a change here so I can share my screen. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, so when you upgrade to the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, first thing you're going to notice is what hasn't changed. All of your records, everything, the way you're currently using the Nonprofit Starter Pack is going to be no different unless you want it to be different. And we'll cover a little bit more of that later. But one of the first things you're going to notice is if you're used to the current version of Nonprofit Starter Pack and you wanted to change a setting somewhere, you had to go hunting all over the place to 6 different objects in the correct settings, and you had a bar full of tabs of this setting and that setting. They have redesigned it, so the settings are now in one place. And you think, okay, big deal, that's preferences. Woohoo. It's actually quite more than that because it's been redesigned in the idea of usability. So walking through really quickly, what are the changes that are different, that are not just transplanted from the old settings screen? You have the account model, and we'll demonstrate what the new household account model looks like. But when you first upgrade, if you are using the one-to-one model in Nonprofit Starter Pack 2, you're going to have, when you upgrade, the account model is going to stay with what you had before. You are not forced to go to this model. You have different now account record types that correspond with it. Households, the big news in households is you have the ability, only if you change to the household account model, to customize custom fields and how exactly you want the name, formal greeting, and informal greeting. I know with many of our projects we've spent a lot of development time trying to override how Nonprofit Starter Pack handled greetings out of the box because it was one way or no way. Now you have that ability to customize. That's the huge difference there, and this is also a big new difference. If you're using the household account model, address management has gotten a tremendous boost. You can now do built-in address verification. You basically bring your own service. It supports Smarty Streets, Google, and I believe they have one other where the code is there. You need to go and set up an account with one of these services. Some are free, some are not, some are donated, some are not. And then simply by putting in a few keys, you get address verification. I'll demonstrate how that looks. Donations, rather than having household settings be where you control how roll-up's happening, which makes no sense whatsoever, it's now more logically organized. And when you're working with it, it's a lot easier. You don't have the field names are much easier to work with. And recurring, most everything else is very similar, so I'm going to not spend a lot of time on it. There is a webinar that the foundation did, which you can find on their YouTube channel, which goes into more general Nonprofit Starter Pack. But the other big difference is under system tools. A lot of times you get errors or problems and you have to go troubleshoot and you don't know why you're getting an error. They now have Health Check, which will check all of your records and come up with a list of anything that just doesn't look right. Maybe you've got an account that doesn't have contacts, or you have a setting that's causing an error. This is a wonderful troubleshooter, which I've used quite often. And finally, the big difference is trigger management. And this is really only for the developers or people who are working with developers, but this allows you to really control and avoid a lot of the limits and problems that you have, and a developer can work with this, and third-party tools can work with this to make the applications that you work with the nonprofit starter pack work better. So what does that mean? So let's take a look first at, in our little demo org here, at a contact under the new model. So this, if this contact had been with the old model, you would have seen the account name would have been Lisa James with the one-to-one. I would have had a household lookup. So instead, with the household account model, her name is the household name, and we'll go to that in a bit. Lisa works for Mellow Johnny's Bikes, so that's her primary affiliation. The rest is the same. I have her mailing address here, and I'll dig in a little bit to show exactly what's exciting about that. And then you have, exactly like what you're already used to, all of the roll-ups. There's some extras here because of some of the apps we have installed, but all of the roll-up fields that you're used to and like from before are there. So let's go now to her account, which is the household. So in many ways, it's going to look very similar to custom household object, except for the fact that it's an account. If you saw a castle here, it would look just like the household looked like before. You've got your, but now you have a primary contact. For those who are maybe familiar with other tools, such as Common Ground, think of this as the head of household. And so the fact that there is a primary contact allows formulas. It allows for more flexibility and customization. If you want to edit by hand the formal greetings or the namings, you can go here and you get the same household interface that you may be used to, but it's customized now to work off the account. So we have Lisa and Richard. Leslie is their child, so I don't want that person to be on here. I can override the greetings. I can adjust the addresses. I can change custom fields. So in that respect, it is very similar to what you're used to. The key is when you get into a situation where you've got people who are connected to both households and organizations. So, and one other thing that we're looking at as well, so we have the people here. So let's take a look at the addresses. And this is actually the most robust development is here and the coolest. So if we look at the default address, which is set up automatically when you first set up an account. This record is set. It's verified. The address verification also pulls in the correct country code. It pulls in the zip 5. I put in Austin, but it recognized, this is KELL's office, but it recognized that it's really correct to be Westlake Hills, so it updated that. The geolocation, so if you've got mapping integrations, congressional districts for your advocacy, and then I just on this record showed this is what gets pulled in to show these are the values that you can start working with for your own customization. You do also, and this is the default address, you have the ability. So if I go back now to the account and addresses are exclusively on the account, list someone who has a vacation home in Beverly Hills. Lucky them. So that's their vacation residence, and I know the dates that they're on vacation. So every year from June 15th to September 5th, when I send out a mailing over the summer, I don't want to have to worry, am I reaching them at their home or where their secondary address is. It will automatically, in a batch process, update all the addresses to be that address and then switch it back when the time ends, and it updates the start and end dates. So that is a very powerful, very helpful feature, and they are considering it. Right now it only works on household accounts. They are considering adding this functionality to organization accounts as well. So as I was saying, the final thing I wanted to show you is that split environment. So Lisa is the primary contact and she's the one who writes the check every time their household makes a gift. But her husband, or her partner, Richard, he happens to be the primary trustee at the Smith Family Foundation, and the Smith Family Foundation gives a large grant to the organization a year. Now, this is a model that was always so challenging in the starter pack, switching back and forth, how to track gifts. Now with the new Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 and this model, it's very clear. So I'm looking at Richard. His gift history is the household gift history, but now Smith Family Foundation has made a grant. And it's very clear on the organization record who on the grant record that's here, my screen's a little slow, that Richard is the primary, and when I look at the Smith Family Foundation record, I can see right here that Richard is the primary contact. So that helps a lot when I am doing mailings, when I am communicating with the attendees, that I'm able to contact and get in touch with the right person. So everything else is very similar, how opportunities work, how payments work, but the idea being is that where someone lives is their account, where someone works is their affiliation, makes reporting a whole lot easier. So I am going to change the presenter back right now to Tommy. And if folks have questions, I do see the question window. Tommy, we're going to address those at the end?
Yeah, and while I'm, I tell you what, let's see. We will address those in a few minutes.
Yeah, I do see one, and I can address that after, then along with any others.
So, well, I just wanted to kind of reinforce something that we said a moment ago, and sorry, Judy, which is, you know, there are a couple of other webinars that, as you mentioned, have been recorded where folks can get more information about the functionality of the starter pack. You know, so what we're not trying to do today is to also give a demonstration of the starter pack and also talk about all the great new features. We wanted to give you a brief demonstration, which Judy just did, so that we can talk more about the upgrade, because the upgrade is the real, you know, the real focus of this. And it's that model that you talked about, you know, the household one-to-one account model that is such the big change. And maybe you could just spend another second talking about that before we jump into some of the upgrades.
Sure, yeah. So that is by far the big change, because as Salesforce hasn't changed, Salesforce still requires an account for every contact. The question is, for a nonprofit, how are you going to handle that account where you don't necessarily know that the place is a place of business, but then how do you handle other contacts where the account is their place of business? That hybrid model is the big challenge. So if you've got a contact that you currently already have in the Nonprofit Starter Pack, where John Smith works at Smith Family Foundation and his account is Smith Family Foundation, that model is still supported in Nonprofit Start Pack 3. Nothing prevents you from doing that. It's just not the best practice recommended at this point for all of the trouble that you might have with reporting and figuring out what's an affiliated contact versus a regular contact, and you don't have that shadow record. So if in the screen that Tommy has up right now, if I clicked on that Arnold Smith account name, I would land on the contact. And if there is a data issue with that Arnold Smith account, it's just not there, and it's hard to troubleshoot, it's hard to fix. We've all had those data challenges. It also, and one thing I didn't touch on that the new version helps, is data storage. I know a lot of you are having challenges with that. It seems it balloons by the second. Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 will save you data, because you now no longer have that useless Arnold Smith account clogging things up. If you have 2 people in a household, you're saving half the space. So that's a benefit. Was that cover it?
Yeah, that's great. So let's get into upgrades. And why don't you go ahead and lead us through discussing
Sure.
what the options are.
Great. So there are really three options. And number one, and I actually, for many, number one might actually be the best choice. Don't upgrade. So if you have, everybody's been trained and you have a lot of customization and it is working for you now, maybe it's not perfect. There's no deadline. There is no time that the Salesforce Foundation is going to say, okay, you're out. Everybody who's using Starter Pack 1 or anything older, if you're not using Starter Pack 3, you're done. On the Power of Us Hub, they still support and answer questions about all different configurations, and it's designed in such a way that a Salesforce release won't break it. There's a lot of concern of, a year from now it's going to be broken. That's not going to happen because that's not how Salesforce works. There are people who are using the same configuration that was current in 2008 in Salesforce and what was recommended at the nonprofits, and they're still using it. So that's option one. Option two is you can upgrade to the Nonprofit Starter Pack anytime you want. And as I showed you, the Nonprofit Starter Pack settings, even though I had it set on the household account, you can also select one-to-one individual bucket model. You can, when you upgrade, it leaves all the settings with what it was before. And the advantage to doing that is you don't have to make any data changes. It's a lot less painful. And you now get all the future upgrades pushed to your organization without you having to worry about. So that is one other big difference in the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. Once you upgrade once, every 2 weeks, the latest changes are pushed automatically to your organization, so you don't have to do anything. Every other week, they push changes to the sandbox. You have to upgrade in the sandbox first, so you should have a sandbox with the latest version of Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, your production with the latest version, and you get to have all the bug fixes. They put bug fixes in recurring donations. They put a lot of bug fixes. You get to have that without making the change. The third one is the big one, and that's where we're going to next focus most of the remaining time on this webinar, is upgrading and converting your data to the new household account model. Why would you want to do that? Well, for all the reasons I said. So all the great stuff I showed you with address renaming, with the address verification, with household name renaming, all of anything that touches households and is going to be new and interesting is entirely going to be focused on the household account model. The foundation is not going to be making any code changes or feature enhancements for the older models. So it is a matter of when you upgrade and convert, do you want to do it now or later? But the foundation and we at KELL do strongly urge all organizations to consider, if they're on one-to-one, going to the household account model. Tommy?
Yep, sorry, I was
okay. I was like, maybe you're there.
Let's talk about whether or not it's going to be hard. So, this is what we really wanted to present in this webinar today is a very honest, very straightforward, detailed assessment to help you make these decisions, because this is not the new iPhone 6. And if you're multitasking, watching Apple announcements, good for you. You can watch this recording later at your convenience. So this is not as simple as pushing a button. There can potentially be some challenges to this. And KELL is very honest about when you need our help and when you don't need our help. And for some of you, this upgrade will be as simple as you just following along in the instructions and upgrading it yourself. But for some, it's unfortunately just not that easy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our time and talk through some of the considerations that may or may not affect you, and to help you understand whether you're going to need some expert help. So the first one, Judi, custom fields on the household. What does that mean?
Okay, so what that means is if you on the household object, So to back up a little bit, the foundation does provide a utility for converting from the one-to-one to the household account model. And you're probably thinking, great, I'm just going to use that. What do I need you for, KELL? Well, it's not that simple. The utility only moves over the standard fields that come already on the household object. So if you're tracking any custom fields whatsoever that are unique to your organization, that is not going to get moved over. So that is the first thing you have to look at. Look at your household object and look for that managed package icon and look at what's left, because anything that's left you will have to have manually relocated to the account and the data part that is part of those fields relocated as well. So next one. So multiple addresses on the household. Before in the nonprofit starter pack, one of its great selling points was the fact that directly on the household record and as well as on the contact and account record, you had an address for their primary address, you had an other address, you had multiple different addresses on the same record, and you had a selector where you were able to pick which one of the same addresses on the same record was the primary one that counted as the main mailing address. So if you're moving to the household account model and you have that, you've got addresses all over the place on the same record, that data now has to get transferred over to the address object so that it behaves with all that great functionality that I showed you. Otherwise, if you've got a work address and a home address, you don't really have the ability now to select which one is the primary, because the primary is going to pull from the address object instead of addresses that are directly on the record. Next one.
Gotcha. So for that, it's really about moving the data. It's about, if you've got all these different addresses, you're going to have to move the data into the new structure, right?
Correct, exactly.
Okay. So the next one, other applications that may be impacted.
Yeah, this one's a biggie. So this one, and this is where the big answer of it depends comes from, because we have no way of knowing exactly what coding behind the scenes is happening in the applications that you have installed. So, for example, one of the things, because I've been working with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 for months and months and months, I picked up an incompatibility with Click and Pledge, which is a huge package that many folks are using. And Click and Pledge has managed to fix the problem, and now it works fine. There may be other applications that, for whatever reason, someone who has been beta testing has not figured out that there's a problem with how it works with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. And so you're going to want to pay attention to that to make sure that you aren't the ones who are going to end up finding that problem the hard way. So one of the things that we can do is, and to consider, is we're keeping a running list of what works and what doesn't, and the foundation as well is checking against that to make sure that what you're working with has been completely vetted and to work with Nonprofit Starter Pack 3.
Okay. Code dependency.
So for many of you, either from us or another partner, you've had triggers built. You've had things that are unique to your instance that have been set up, or applications that you've installed. Anything anywhere in code that refers to that unique household object needs to be rewritten to make sure it refers to account instead. And that's something that we need a thorough review and plan to deal with.
I know we've had a lot of our clients ask for custom triggers that create different calculations or different dates or things, and have those fields populated on the household, and it all happens magically behind the scenes. And you know, for some organizations, they may not even know that that's working, right? Like maybe you started at the organization long after that was done, and you don't even know that that field is being populated through some sort of trigger. You're going to need to figure that out, not how to solve it and how to recode it, but at least identify, or have us help you identify whether there's any code dependencies.
So formula fields on other objects. Now this is a tricky one. Salesforce makes it really, really easy to make what is known as a cross-object formula. And that can happen directly in a field definition. It also can happen in a workflow rule. It can even happen off reports. And so one of the things you have to look for to see if you've got any formula fields going on where you're pulling directly from the contact to look at their household in the household custom object and make the necessary changes so you're going from contact to account and not contact to household. And that could be really tricky because you're not going to get an error message. The household object cannot be deleted. It's part of Nonprofit Starter Pack, even if you're using the household account model. So you can make a formula and you'll see contact household and think, you know, this is great. It's doing just what you want it to do, but it won't work because it needs to do contact account. We'll work to make sure that, you know, the household object isn't visible for users, it's not getting in the way, but it's still going to be there, and you're going to have to specifically look for those instances where the household object is involved and deal with it.
You know, that also reminds me of talking about data. So the household object is still going to be there, but as a part of your upgrade, you want to make sure that you're wiping out all that household object record data so that you can take advantage of the data storage savings that you get through the account model, correct?
Yes, and that's one of the very, very last steps we do in the upgrade is we take care of that, of course, after doing a complete backup. So how account versus household mixed uses. This was what I was talking about before, where the current common model is to have the contacts account be the one-to-one if you count it as a household, and have it be the organization if you count it as an organization contact. It's the way we've configured it. That was the accepted best practice. Now, because of all the reasons I said, and I was resistant because this was a big change, but now I've come to embrace it and agree that it's best practice. So the idea that every contact's account is the household with the primary affiliation being the account, there needs to be, if you agree as well that that's a best practice and you want to move to it to make reporting easier and accounting easier, there is some data configuration consideration that you have to do to make sure that in the conversion your new data is accurately reflecting that model.
All right, custom objects.
Yeah, with relationships. So I talked about formula fields on other objects. Another thing to consider is you've made a custom object and you've created a relationship, either lookup or even master detail, to household. You've got to go through now, and this is not quite as easy. Formula fields, you just go edit the formula, put in the new, done. This is actually a little more complex because changing a primary relationship on a custom object can be tricky. It can have big impact depending on the type of relationship, depending on the data that's already in it. So it's yet another thing where we go through, we make a checklist, we just analyze the impact. That's where figuring, you know, is it going to be easy or hard? That's one of the areas that could potentially make it hard depending on how you're customized.
And workflow rules.
Workflow rules. That's anything where the first object that the workflow rule is acting on is household. That you can't just go in and edit it. You can't change the primary object on a workflow rule. You have to redo it. Reports and dashboards. If you look at your report type, when you edit your reports and you look in the upper left-hand corner for the report type, if you see the word household there, it means it's a report that is built entirely using the household object, and just like the workflow rule, there's no edit and change the report type. That report has to be redone.
So thanks, Judy. This is just a listing of all the different considerations, you know, those which might make your upgrade a little more challenging. Now, just to kind of reiterate, we don't expect that every client is going to have every single one of these types of issues. Most likely you're going to have one or maybe two or three, but you're not likely going to have all of them. Things like the code dependencies and other applications, Many organizations are going to have that. That's going to be very few and far between. But it's just all of these are very important considerations that need to factor into when and how you upgrade. So let's say you are going to upgrade, right? And let's say that you have several of these different conditions that are going to make it a little bit more tricky. Will it hurt? Judi, tell us about what's the process going to be like?
So one thing to just say up front, this is not something that you're going to say on a Friday, you know what, I'm just going to, over the weekend or on Monday morning, switch me over. There is actually some user downtime that you have to plan for. The reason for that is in the actual conversion process, every single account contact has to be touched and converted. So that means changing around who the account is. It might be some ownership updates. It's moving things around. The process also requires some deactivation of running processes, because when you're changing a record, if you have a workflow rule that's going to fire if the record is updated or changed, you don't want those rules firing. So part of the upgrade process is putting your organization kind of into a frozen mode, keeping users out, because you don't want someone creating a new one-to-one model in the middle of while you're converting everything else. That actual downtime can vary depending on the customization. It could be as short of, shouldn't take on average longer than one workday, but depending on the customization, you might have to plan for a little bit longer of not really having full access to Sandbox. So like I said, you can't have users. The way the conversion process works is the more accounts and contacts you have, more households, the longer it's going to take. So even if you don't have a lot of customization, but you have 200,000 households, it's going to take a long time because there's code that goes on in the background, and the batch size of how many records can be converted at one time is really on the small side. So those factors working together, volume and complexity will determine it, but that's the part where you kind of have to plan in advance, and folks who've done migrations from Common Ground or other services know that working in that freeze time, that downtime, is very important when you're considering if you want to make the upgrade.
All right, so important considerations. How are you going to know, what can you do to help identify whether or not, A, it's even possible for you to upgrade? Because we kind of mentioned this briefly, but some organizations we have found think they're on the nonprofit starter pack, but they're actually not. Because if you really go back into the history, starting in 2007 and then 2008, there was what was called the nonprofit template, which was not, using Salesforce speak, a managed package. And so because it was not a managed package, it was as if a consultant or a friend just spent a bunch of time customizing your instance of Salesforce to work for you. That version, the nonprofit template, can be upgraded, but it's going to follow a different path. It's less of an upgrade and honestly more of a migration, right? But if you are using 1.x or 2.x, any of those different variations of the different packages that are in the managed package, that's going to be an important consideration to understand as a part of whether an upgrade is impossible. Also, another homework assignment that you can do is tracking what are and inventorying what are the installed applications that you have. This is always just a good health and maintenance practice anyway, because especially if you're new to the organization that you're working for and you go into the setup and you go and look at the installed applications and you see, oh, there's a Blue Laser app that was installed back in 2012. Is anybody even using that, right? Doing an inventory to identify whether all of the applications are actually in use is always a healthy thing. And we might help you in making some decisions around which applications should be purged and obviously which applications are going to have an impact on the potential upgrade to the new starter pack. And as Judi talks through your reports It's not always as easy to identify in a report whether there's household data being displayed in that report. And if you simply wipe out all the households and do the upgrade without moving around the data, you could damage the reports that you have, or at least render them less useful than they were previously because you don't have the same information for your analysis. So a good homework assignment is to take an inventory. What are those key reports? Often they're linked to a dashboard. That's a good place to start. Figure out what are those key reports that you want to absolutely make sure are preserved so that when you start the migration process, you'll have that information ready to prioritize how you go about making some of these changes. Judi, anything to add as far as homework?
I think that is a great place to start. Also follow there's a lot of conversation about Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 on the Power of Us Hub. So if you're not already there looking at the Nonprofit Starter Pack groups that are there, that's also. And you also see lots of people with installers, and that's really where the primary support channel is, so that you can get an idea of some of the issues and challenges that others are having before you dive in for yourself. We have some questions, Tommy, so I don't know if your plan was.
Great. You want to, I'm not looking at them just because I'm sure I'm
I will. So some of the questions we've had is, I think I've already addressed for Robert the question about creating organization accounts and contacts and the implication of moving to the new recommended model. Good question from Chap. Is the Outlook to Salesforce fully integrated with Nonprofit Starter Pack 3? Depends on how you describe fully. Challenges being, as you know, with Salesforce, it's designed for a commercial, private, business-to-business organization that converts leads, that creates opportunities for future sales with products. And the Outlook integration is really designed primarily for that model. You will have a better time, though, with the Outlook to Salesforce because the fact that you are going to be living more on the account record than a custom object right out of the box. That integration, every app, including the Outlook integration, knows what a Salesforce account is and knows what to do with it and doesn't have to guess what is this strange household custom object that's not connected to anything. So you'll have a better time with it, and heads up that there is a product called Sirius that is coming up with an Outlook integration. So I keep an eye on that. I know that's been challenging for organizations. Another question, what other known apps like Click and Pledge with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3? Like I said, Click and Pledge is fully, we've been working with it in our own instances for a while. We've run into no problems with Click and Pledge, and we're actively communicating with the folks at Click and Pledge on any issues that we do find, and they're reacting very quickly to that. Stay Classy does not have a problem. Most every tools that nonprofits use day in and day out have no problem with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 because they let, when you create a new contact, it doesn't force the creation of an account, and that's what allows it to work. So as we find other, like maybe lesser known apps that have challenges, you know, we'll report, but I can't think of any off the top of my head right now. Everything seems to be working great.
You know, one of the things that I'm most excited about with this new, or the use of the standard data model, is duplicate management apps. Because that has long been a challenge with the starter pack, because you could use a product like Ring Lead or Cloud Dingo or Dupe Catcher and Dupe Blocker and some of these other products, but they were ignorant to this thing called a household because they were really focused on the core objects, leads, contacts, accounts, and opportunities. So I know that one of our colleagues working at KELL, Emily Walton, has done some pretty extensive research on how these duplicate management products now work with the starter pack, the new version of starter pack. And so far we've seen really good results, and that's another huge benefit of this consolidation to the standard model.
And if you're the type like me who reads Salesforce release notes for fun and entertainment, you might have picked up that in Winter 15, the next version that's coming up, they are now putting beta native preventative dupe management in Salesforce. And I've been on the pilot in our test org, the one that I just showed you, almost since the beginning, and I'm very pleased to report that it works just fine with Nonprofit Starter Pack, both version 2 and 3. So that will probably solve a lot of headaches when it comes out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It might eliminate a third-party application that you're using today.
You still need the preventative, like if you have already duplicates or you have duplicates in like other custom objects, you still need something else. It just works on account, contact, and lead right now. Okay. So, there's just one other question. Go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry.
I also wanted to just pull up this slide just to kind of keep it there because, you know, just to reiterate, like you have a few options here, you know, with this upgrade. And just to kind of keep with what Judi had said, this is not another common ground situation where, you know, the foundation is deprecating a product or sunsetting it. They're offering an optional upgrade. So just bear that in mind, take a deep breath. This is not something you have to do right away. There are obviously benefits to this, but if it ain't broke, as Judi says, you know. Was there another question, Judi?
The other question, you know, and if I don't get to your question, it probably is because it's more general about Salesforce data model or nonprofit starter packs, so we can follow up with you afterwards and be happy to answer, you know, your more general questions. I'm sticking to the ones that are very specific about the upgrade. So Maggie asked, they have a lot of customization on account and contacts, but not on the household. You know, is this everything really impacted only on how customization and apps relate to the household? Except for any third-party apps that we're not aware of that you're using, that in general don't like any of some of the new trigger handling that's in the nonprofit starter pack, and that's completely unrelated. Anything related to changing your data model from the one-to-one to the household are really only impacted if you want to go to the recommended model of creating households for records where you currently don't track their household information. So the fact is, if I was in KELL's instance as Judi Sohn with my KELL partners, because that's where I work, they might not also have a household record that tracks that I live in New Jersey with my husband Eric and my teenagers. So making that decision, do I want to now add household records even if that household is not going to really impact how I deal with that person? That's where you're going to get the challenge. So even if you don't use the household object now, it's going to be something you should consider if you want to go to the best practice model of where they live is the household, even if you don't know right now where they live, where they work is the affiliation. And the reason why you might want to do that is you might have a contact who you are totally communicating with as a business contact. They are your key contact. You work with them on getting your grants. You work with them on sponsoring events. But they're also getting your email, and come December 20th, they click the button and they give you, with their Gmail address, a personal donation. Now, how are you going to track that? Because you only have them in Nonprofit Starter Pack connected to an organization. And if you add that gift, the account on that opportunity is going to be that organization. So if you go to the new model, you have that ability at any time to consider someone a personal contact as well as a business contact without having to make any changes or considerations. So that's where your homework is, to think about that and say, is that something we want?
Great. Any other questions we want to address?
Yeah, nothing I think that we need to address right here.
Okay. All right, everybody. Well, we will end the call today, and I want to thank everybody for participating and joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday and rest of your week, and you have our contact information, so should you have any follow-up questions or would like for us to help you in putting together a proposal to conduct the upgrade, obviously we'd love to hear from you. So have a great day. Thanks, everybody.